But it's interesting you talk about her not thinking it was personal. And I do wonder sometimes whether she didn't want to think of it as personal, because if she thought of it as personal, she'd have to face some facts that she didn't want to face. So it may have been a bit of both.
A coping mechanism, a protective coping mechanism. I mean, we'll talk about trauma a little bit later on because there is something called betrayal trauma. There are different types of trauma, and it's a very specific trauma when we don't want to face something that we deep down know, but we don't want to talk about it or face it because it's just so devastating. And therefore, it is like a protective way of dealing with something really, traumatic in our lives. So how long was it that you were sort of talking to her to then realizing actually, because I know you had a phone call, the police had a phone call from one of her friends who was a doctor who was concerned about the way Emile had treated Vicky and clearly thought there was something suspicious about what had happened with the fall. Could you just give us an idea of that timeline and that call?
So the incident happened, I believe it was the 5th of April. I'm going to say the 5th of April. And he was arrested on the 28th of April. So in the interim, we had, I received a phone call from a very good friend of Victoria's at work. And that was probably a week after, I would suggest, something like a week after, maybe not quite as much as that. And she said that she had concerns about their relationship. It wasn't the perfect relationship, it would appear to the outside world. She knew there were financial issues. She knew that there were suspicions that Emile had been unfaithful and was continuing to be unfaithful, that he potentially had a Tinder account. And she had actually said to the chief instructor at Netheravon that if Emile had been anywhere near the parachute centre when it happened, then she would have her suspicions about him. And of course, when the chief instructor said, well, actually, he was here when and took the parachute out for her, I think that's when she decided she really ought to involve police with her thoughts and suspicions. So I spoke to her initially just under a week after the event, but I wasn't able to see her in person to take her statement for another week, a week and a half after that, because she was working away. So until I had that statement formalized by her, we didn't do anything. But once I'd taken that statement, I knew that we were going to have to speak to him in an official capacity, because what she was saying to me was ringing some rather large alarm bells at that point.